Hey, Katarina. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm really well. How are you coping with, are you in a lockdown or not?
Well, we are not in Sweden.
Oh.
Not in the strict sense.
Okay, well,
yeah.
I feel really guilty because I've really enjoyed the lockdown.
Oh.
I've really, and I feel bad about it because I know lots of people have really, really suffered.
Yeah, I know.
I'm pretty, anyway, but we've suffered as well, like everybody else with a cafe and what have you, but overall, I haven't had too bad.
No, I know, and it's a lot of discussions about the way Sweden has met this pandemic. So it's more about trust, that people actually stay at home. So I think in to look at it after, it will be really interesting to see, is trust working in different societies, or do you need to have this kind of regulated lockdown? So in that sense, as an anthropologist, it's really interesting.
There'll be a lot of work. A lot of work was going to be done once this is turned the corner. So,
but I wanted to talk to you today because I have noticed in this pandemic time that more and more companies are doing this kind of mobile ethnography. So several companies has actually called me and asked me to look at those research results because they are disappointed. They thought they bought ethnography and then they end up with something that is so far from ethnography that you actually can come. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that because I know that you were doing this already 2009 when you developed this Ethos app. And we talked a lot about that at that time, and I used that app also in some of my projects. So I don't know, do you recognize this as that companies are really in for this mobile ethnography now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at a time when, unless, depending on the methodology, depending on what you're trying to understand, depending on what you're trying to discover, you can't do face-to-face. No. And we could do interviews like this, but then I'm relying too much on the kind of Q&A approach. And if I want to really capture naturally occurring, spontaneous events, I need to be with you over days and sort of hanging out with you. Now, I can't do that either. So there is a kind of, and I have to call it a bit of a compromise, which is downloading an app, you downloading an app, and me setting instructions for you to complete, which include a lot of show me this, show me that, and then trying to make sense of all that. So, but
my question here is that when the base for ethnography is actually that you have less instructions and questions at all, because you want to be there, you want to see. For example, I worked with a company doing food, and they wanted I realized that they wanted to make new products, new taste and things like that. So they had a lot of questions about what kind of taste do you miss or things like that. And for me, it's more like coming in, studying the dinner, studying the everyday life in the kitchen, and then you see these white spaces. So that's my question. How do you do that when you work in your application?
It's very, very hard because people's comfort zone is questions and answers. You ask a question, you get an answer. And it is just about the worst thing you can do in ethnographic research, in my view. In fact, the whole kind of, when I hear the term ethnographic interviews, my toes curl. As much as possible, when we use mobile tools, we try to set tasks that are not about show me this or go and do that and explain what it feels like or what have you. It's very much about just capture things as they happen. Tell us the story of your day. Now that means that I then have to go through that content and see where my gaps are in understanding, and then to set a new set of questions and probes. So that even means creating probes on the go.
Yeah, so you have to follow them like you do also.
Absolutely. I've had clients in the past who've set 15 questions, posted it, and then called me back after 2 weeks and said, nobody really completed them all, or there was no sound on this video. I'm like, if there was no sound, you should have seen that on the first day rather than 2 weeks later, and we could have done something about it. There was a problem with her device or what. So they just kind of see it as an automated remote research project that they can walk away from.
Yeah, so I think it's both those research companies and also for the businesses, because they don't really know, and ethnography is a little bit trendy, it's hot, you know, you think that that's the way to get the idea of your customers' needs and behaviors. But for me, it's like, you know, I've seen so many companies selling ethnography, and it's actually ethnography-free ethnography. Because you don't have this knowledge, you can't, you know, walk through the whole process like you do in your projects.
I mean, for me, the first question is, why do they want to do an ethnographic project, right? Well, what are they trying to unravel? Go through the brief. If there's a whole load of questions that you see there or objectives that you can find out through Q&A, challenge the client. That's the first thing. And the number of times I go through a brief and I think, what on earth do they want to film this for? Why do they want to explore this? Now, if a client turns around and says, I want to know what it's like to be in the shoes of that person. What is it like to be them? Then we're kind of getting close to ethnographic territory. And then within that, there are things such as understanding contradictions in people's lives. Contradictions are really important because they reveal sometimes that you're asking the wrong question. Okay.
Yeah.
What people don't do or nearly do is a really important one. Not just, well, it's really easy to see what they do, but what they don't do. And then all of the kind of spontaneous, naturally occurring decision-making, events, conversational stuff. It's really hard to capture this stuff with one of these, right? It is really, really tough. But it's not so hard if you do it iteratively, if you do it in small steps and build up your understanding, not over a huge length of time, but over kind of 2 or 3 weeks at least, I would say. And following the individual and building up a picture.
But what would you say is the most common mistakes people do when they try to use technology to do ethnography?
Ask questions.
Yeah.
Ask questions. What do you think about this? Or what are your feelings?
What don't you find on the market? What kind of taste do you miss? What kind of, you know, those questions. And for me, I get crazy when I see those kind of questions because people don't know what they miss.
Absolutely.
And they try to answer because they want to be polite and they want to be, you know,
this is the
smart.
biggest problem. This is the biggest problem. They answer to fill your request, basically. You've got a kind of set number of questions, and you know, there's two things. I've used this. The first problem I have, if somebody was to ask me to capture everything I snack on, I remember, and I think I posted this in one of my LinkedIn posts, I got to the point where I got tired of capturing stuff, so I stopped eating. Because I couldn't be bothered to take the camera every time.
But maybe also because you were a researcher yourself, so you felt that I want to be honest to, you know,
I have to be honest, exactly.
So otherwise, maybe someone else should have taken some snacks without telling. So, but you were more honest.
Without telling, or even worse than that, just capturing snacks for the sake of capturing to show me, you know, that they do snacks. So there's all sorts of problems, which is why I prefer to give them the camera and start with what I call sort of outside-in approach. At Mars, we do a lot of outside-in. At EOM, we do a lot of outside-in explorations, which is the fundamental rule being, we don't probe anything that hasn't already been mentioned by the participant.
No, exactly, and that's a key to do ethnography.
Absolutely, you can't.
So for me, no, because I think it's interesting because when you talk about this ethnography-free ethnography, because I have seen it for many years, but now this digital has boomed really, because that's the way how to still get to know people and people's everyday life. But for me, it's like, okay, you have an education, you have a profession, because we need standards, we need the way of doing this. So for me, it's important that people who really can do ethnography and have the skills and the knowledge, that they also, you know, take this bit and start to evolve and develop this way of doing ethnography. And the thing is that I don't know if you see it, because I don't see it that much, that, you know, ethnographers really do this kind of digital development of the method. But maybe it's coming with the pandemic, because I know that many still at the universities talk about how we will do fieldwork in the future.
Well, there's nothing more terrifying for a client than not to know the outcomes from a project. So the idea of going in and not having questions to start with, but seeing how things are, all of that, to most clients who have a budget, a deadline, objectives, is utterly terrifying. So that's the first challenge. And then the number of projects that I see that are kind of called ethnography, but are actually nothing more than qualitative interviews with a video camera. That's a fundamental problem. 90% of them are really good, really nice quality interviews filmed, and they call those ethnography.
Yeah, and I also, because you said that they really want to know where they are going in the research, but also I have noticed that sometimes they are not satisfied with this kind of insights we give them, because they think it's too blurry, they just want a figure, they just want some different new tastes to do or whatever. So they also have problematic dealing with this kind of research sometimes.
Well, in fact, that's a really interesting point, Katarina, because I have, and recently kind of become, and again in the work that I'm doing, realize that there are a lot of questions when you get to the end of the project. There are a lot of gaps that still need to be filled in. And we then apply other approaches. We will go in and follow up with desk research. We will speak to experts. We will, it is absolutely fine to do that, to not just be reliant on 20 participants for 2 weeks of explorations, but to then back it all up, get the cultural context, understanding that you wouldn't immediately get. So again, it's just layering, understanding over.
So I know that people are busy. If we should end this, I would say that my first advice to someone who wants to do some kind of insight job is actually to think of the question, what do you want to know? What are you interested in doing? Like you said, that I want to follow in my customers' shoes, because I have noticed that so many companies don't really know when to use what kind of method. You know, they really don't know, because sometimes an interview is enough. Sometimes you can make a quantitative survey, and sometimes you really need to do real ethnography. So that would be the first question I would ask someone who are knowledgeable in research methods, before you just think that, wow, let's do ethnography because that's cool.
I think, you know, you're again, as always, Katarina, absolutely spot on. I think the critical thing for me is to have a very, very simple objective. And rather than 15 questions that you want answered, if you start in a place which says, I just want to know what it's like to be these people. How do they think? I used to send clients in home. They hated it. They were terrified of it. But I used to send them to live with participants for a day.
Yeah.
And they would come out of it. Well, then you'll know they come out of it and they are like, it's like they have been reborn.
Yeah, I know.
And it's always like, now I have that participant there for the rest of my life. I know how they think. I know what makes them tick. I know what makes them laugh. I know. And somehow we have to convey that from our understanding. And it's about telling the story and putting it together in a way that helps the client make some important decisions. That's what it's all about. But before I mean, people I work with, before they make any decisions, they completely rip into what I've got. We deconstruct it, we dismantle it, and then we reassemble it. We go back to the participants. We do desk research. So it's for me, the mobile ethnography bit is really a very small part of it, unless you have a simple Q&A interview and you want to know what the answers are, which then isn't ethnography. And that can be, you know, it depends what you're trying to do.
Yes.
But it's so badly misused. It's awful in many, many cases.
Yes, it is. So shall we end now?
Let's end now, but thank you so much. I hope it's been a little bit helpful, and I loved seeing you again. It's been such a long time.
Yes.
And
I come and visit soon.
definitely. I'll look forward to it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.